We are continuing our study of the art side of photography by taking on the next set of compositional guidelines. The guideline that this mushroom picture illustrates is make negative space as pleasing as positive space. And if you've studied art before, you know that there's an element of art which is called space. In music, we hear notes, but in between the notes there are silences, there are spaces in between the notes. So when we look at a simple picture like this, we see the mushroom and then we see the background. And the background is actually called negative space. And down here there's kind of a curvy edge triangle, and up here we have kind of a freeform shape, and these black areas are called negative space. To a snapshot photographer, a point and shoot photographer, negative space is nothing to be concerned about. To an art photographer, it is something to be very concerned about. The subject, okay, the subject is definitely why the picture was taken, but how it's presented, and you'll recall that the first four lines are the edges of the picture. It's called the format, and how you divide and how you shape the contents of those first four lines are very important. In this case, we have a wonderful curved line that almost takes off into an S shape here and goes around, and that would be our fifth line. It's kind of a diagonal, but at the same time the circle is present. So when we take certain kinds of pictures, silhouette like this, the first four lines, the edges, you have to say, how am I going to break this rectangle up into a pleasing fashion? And when you are considering how much background and how much background and how much background, where you're going to split this looks like it's been lined up with our rule of thirds, because we have a junction here, which is where a third this way and a third up from the bottom. So this is not just random. These choices have to be considered just as carefully as how much of the tree are we going to show. Another place where we have negative space, I kind of like this picture because it shows a flower from the bottom looking up, which is an unusual camera angle. And the negative space is the dark blue here and the lighter blues down here. So the heart shape of the flower and how it fits, it's not just swimming in a huge background of blue. The proportions, the distances from the edge, the distances from the top, looks like we have another rule of thirds happening right in front of our eyes here. So negative space, something to think about. There's a principle of design which is called unity. And unity and variety are on the same I would say, the same kind of a slider. Um, every picture is going to have both. It's going to have some variety and it's going to have some unity. So here we have variations on a theme, and that is to keep our picture from being chaotic. If you've studied the history of photography, you may have seen a famous picture of a silhouette of a running horse, and that was taken by 19th century photographer Edward Muybridge. Well, Muybridge did a whole book on what's called animal locomotion, and it was an aid to artists who were trying to paint and draw more realistically. Here he studied how a pig walks, and he has several pictures. Now, when Photoshop first came out in the 1980s, somebody thought it would be fun to take an old picture and then add a new touch to it. So by using Photoshop, they started to use these pig shapes, but they filled it in with all sorts of variety of things. So we have a unity factor of the pigs, and we have a variety factor of what those things were filled in for. Uh, Here is another variations on a theme. We have faces and faces and faces, and quite a few of them are almost in the same direction, but every once in a while we'll have a profile, we'll have a little variation. And then the hats, the straw hats. There's unity in the fact that everybody has the straw hat, but there's variety in how much of the straw hats we're seeing and from what angle. So each one of these people are contributing to a group, and the group is showing a little bit of variety to keep it from being too much of unity. Simplicity creates unity. Um, this is a stack, a series of glasses, and it's set up on what used to be a very typical kind of product photo setup, which would be a piece of paper that is curved up along the back, and then a spotlight behind the paper. A spotlight is illuminating the paper behind the glasses, and then all of a sudden you have these beautiful highlights that are coming forward. So how close do you crop it? You want to be simple. You want to have nice negative space, but not too much. You'll notice that there's some vignetting that's going on here. That could have been done in camera, or it could have been done afterwards in processing. So simplicity creates unity, and that's a good thing to have in a picture. Here's another very simple people person. Um, don't look at it in so much detail, but you can almost say that you have one part here, okay, and then you have a second part here, and then all of this is a third part, and then the flowers are a fourth part. So it was Thoreau who said, keep all of your accounts on the fingers of one hand. 3 things in a picture, 5 things in a picture, and I'm saying, you know, generally 3 things in a picture, 5 things in a picture. Very nice. When we get into people photography, we're going to talk about head tilt and in this case we have an angle here on the head. So simple, creating unity. Now textures, oh, I'm sorry, this is another simple picture. We have the shadow over here, and we have the real object over here. And looks like a lot of processing going on in this picture, but definitely it's a work of art. It's very nice, simple. Now we get into textures, and that is an element of art. Okay, textures, and you're probably going to relate this to side light. When you're taking pictures of something that has textures, the bark of a tree, the spines on a cactus, a lot of times what you want to do is try and line up the shot so that the sun is off to one side. In this case, we have a high light source. You can see the shadow coming down from the ear, the shadow coming down from the face. Okay, but it's called raking light. And what this does, either side light or this type of a strong top light, it brings out all of the little bumpy bumps in the stucco. It brings out the knit weave in the sweater. It brings out the character lines. We don't call them wrinkles because we're a portrait photographer and we believe in euphemisms. So we say it brings out the character line, it brings out the texture in the hair. So if you're going to be a food photographer or you're going to be a product photographer for online advertising, you have to learn to light whatever it is in the appropriate light so that the viewer who's looking at the picture can get a sense of the touch of what something feels like. I like to discover things out in the desert, old refuse, old trash, things that have been discarded, and maybe these cowboy boots were found out there in some ghost town someplace. Here we have a side light. We have the shadows going off in this direction. Okay, this may be a little more top light. Okay, so we may have raking top light or side light. And the idea here is that we can really get a sense of hard scrabble. This is rocky, this is really rough country, and the dried up leather in the boot here. So we're appealing to one sense through another. They have a fancy word for it, but it slips my mind at the moment. So when you look at something like a luscious close-up of a piece of chocolate cake, if the texture is just right, all of a sudden your mouth will start to water. So it's like it came in through your eyes, it didn't come in through your mouth, but you're actually tasting the chocolate pie or cake that you have. So take into account and try and find the right lighting to bring out the textures in your work. Hope this helps.